friend and I are having an art night where we're just going to work on some creative projects that we have going on. And we've been really wanting to start like a literary circle or an art circle. We're just so inspired by the Inklings, Tolkien and Lewis, and the other guys who are a part of their literary circle who would get together every week or every other week, whatever it was, and just share the projects they were working on, reading them aloud to each other, showing them to each other, and then they like critique each other's work and give feedback. And it was just a really positive, safe space to discuss creative projects with creative people who understand what it's like to have that take up a huge part of your mental space and be a huge part of your life. My friend and I are both super creative. I'm more of a writer and she's more of a visual artist. So we want to get like a group together, but we're having a hard time finding other people whose creative interests are as important to them as they are to us. Oh, she's waving at me now. That's so embarrassing. Anyways, let me know if you have any ideas on how to start like a literary circle or an art circle. Because yeah, this is something that we're probably just going to be thinking about and dreaming about for a long time before we can actually make it happen. So what would be like your vision?
Why don't you talk about it?
So what would the ideal like meeting look like then of the Inkwell Literary Club? Literary
Club?
Circle.
I think sharing a piece that inspired you that week.
Okay.
Or in general, something that you just found beautiful.
Like a piece of literature or art that you came across
Yes.
in your weekly readings or wanderings through the art world.
Wandering through the art world.
Okay. And then also a piece that maybe you've worked on that week.
Something that you're working on. Your current project. What are you trying to accomplish?
Inspo.
And not that this is like something to tie every time, but when you find a piece of work that inspires you, even if it's from like a secular perspective, it's sort of just highlighting common grace.
Right.
And the beauty of, it goes back to that idea of that book, like the creator in you.
Right.
The creator that God has put in every person.
Right. So kind of just investigating
and appreciating
the creative impulse in any person, regardless of whether or not they're Christians and whether or not they're creating their art for God consciously, whether or not they know that that's what they're doing.
Appreciating God's beauty and the creativity of other people.
Love it.
What else? What do you envision?
Would we do this every week though, or more like every other week?
Maybe we start with every other week.
Yeah.
Because
or even once a month. I just think like with how busy we are with our jobs and our church lives and just our lives in general.
And then probably just like
it's not super realistic to come up with a new thing every week. I gotta come up with things that inspired me from stuff that I'm reading or like teaching in school, but in terms of like my own creative output, that's asking quite a lot.
I would have to be a lot more intentional just because I'm not in it at all really. Utensil being
dun dun dun.
Sharpie pen.
Idea time.
For everything in life.
I love those Sharpie pens. They are the best. Check this out. Apple cider donut. And now I'm gonna take about an hour or so to catch up on some readings for school this week. I'm heading out to meet some friends at a local bookstore that's opening up its cafe today. It's the grand opening. And they're also opening up these reportedly gorgeous workspaces. So I'm super pumped for that, just for in the winter when I'm working on my master's. I don't want to be stuck in my tiny house all day or I'll go a little crazy. So it'll be really nice to have another local place to go and just bring my laptop and my books and just work away quietly in a cozy academic atmosphere. So I'm super excited to check that out this afternoon. So I found a book at the bookstore that I'm so excited about. It's called Recovering the Lost Art of Reading, A Quest for the True, the Good, and the Beautiful by Leland Ryken and Glenda Faye Matisse. It's from a Christian perspective, and here are just some of the chapter titles that I'm like, ah. So part 1 of the book is organized as Reading is a Lost Art. Chapter 1 is Reading Lost, 2, What Have We Lost, and 3, Why Consider Reading an Art. Then part 2 is Reading Literature. So the chapter titles are as follows. What is literature? Why does literature matter? What does literature offer? Reading stories. Tell me a story. Reading poems. Songs of the soul. Reading novels. Come away with me. Reading fantasy. A far journey. Reading children's books. Once upon a time. Reading creative nonfiction. To tell the truth. Reading the Bible as literature. Words of delight. And then part 3 is called Recovering the Art of Reading. And the chapter titles are Recovery through Discovery, Truth in Literature, The Moral Vision in Literature, Beauty in Literature, Discovering Literary Excellence, Freedom to Read, Reading Good Books, Calling and Creativity, and Literature and the Spiritual Life Over and Above. I am beyond excited to dig into this, and I think I'm going to dig into it right now and take really detailed notes, and then hopefully I can share some of the insights that I gleaned from this book in an upcoming video. So in chapter 1, the authors are asking, is reading lost? And they're arguing that actually the art of reading well is being lost in our society. They talk about what they call alliteracy, not illiteracy, but alliteracy, which is when people know how to read, but they just don't do it. They choose not to do it. The authors get into some statistics that talk about how in a recent poll, 1 in 4 Americans went a whole year without reading a single book, without consuming a book in any form, be that print, audiobook, or Kindle, nothing. 1 in 4 Americans not reading a single book. That stat kind of shocks me. They also talk about War and Peace being kind of the litmus test for reading ability and perseverance, and how it's still one of the top selling books, but based on the stats, that doesn't really make sense. And so people are buying this book and reading the first 20 pages and giving up. Because it is a tough book to get through, but it's also profoundly beautiful and full of wisdom. The authors kind of say, we don't think War and Peace should be that standard by which we assess whether somebody is a good or a thoughtful reader, because some people are just not gonna enjoy reading War and Peace, but they might enjoy reading the Brothers Karamazov or a Charles Dickens novel or something like that. And in that case, they're still reading good literature. There's a really good quote that I love from this chapter. One man says, "Once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski." And that's just in the context of talking about how the way that we interact with information online and on the internet, and the way that we read and scan and skim, is literally destroying our capacity to read deeply, slowly, carefully, thoughtfully. Like he said, once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. I think that's actually such a good metaphor. I read a lot, and I teach literature, I study literature, and even sometimes I have a hard time staying focused, because my brain is just not able to focus sometimes. And it depends on the time of day, it depends on what I'm reading, it depends on whether I have just a lot on my mind going on in my life. But sometimes I'm really, really shocked and disappointed in my incapacity to just focus on the work in front of me for an extended period of time, because sometimes I just can't. And I'm like, why is this the case? I do think the internet has a lot to do with that and the way that we consume information today. The authors go on to say that to lose old styles of reading, so sitting down, reading slowly and thoughtfully, is to lose a part of ourselves. It's a loss of depth and of wisdom. And then they ask the question, how are we supposed to read scripture well? As people of the book, we need to be able to read well and to think deeply about literature, because scripture is high literature. It's extremely deep and rich. And as Christians, we need to be reading scripture all the time, every day. And so the death of reading, in one sense, is a threat to the soul. The authors go on to say that we're called to quiet our souls and commune with God through an open Bible. Artfully reading the good book and other good books is a treasure that we dare not lose. I think this first chapter is a really good call for myself to just assess the deeper importance of being able to read well, not just so that I can teach it well and so that I can have a YouTube channel where I talk about books, but because it actually serves my faith immensely if I'm able to read well. Three discs stuck in the tree. Started with one, and then we used the other two to try to get it out. Oh my word. So what do we lose if we don't read or we don't read well? We lose meaningful leisure. Leisure is now perceived as diversion or distraction, but it used to be considered a growing time for the human spirit, an occasion for learning and freedom, growth and expression. Artfully reading a wide range of good books is an antidote to boredom and fosters spiritual growth. We also lose a sense of self-transcendence. Reading allows us to rise above ourselves and to focus on other people, larger themes, or on God. We experience a loss of beauty. Reading great literature is a primary avenue for fostering our sense of beauty. We all intuitively have a desire for beauty. If we're not reading, we're losing contact with the past. And we're also losing contact with essential human experience. Reading great literature leads to an increased understanding of life. Literature allows us to see our own lives more clearly and accurately. Literature gives our longings and our fears a voice. We also lose our edification. We experience the loss of an enlarged vision. Reading produces a full person. Literature not only imitates the world around us, but adds to our world's materials, because literary authors are sub-creators under God. Chapter 3 was about why consider reading an art. Chapter 4 was about defining literature, and this is kind of the simple definition that they give at the end of the chapter. Literature is a concrete, interpretive presentation of human experience in an artistic form. The 5 foundational principles of literature: it's experiential, it recreates experiences and emotions, provides a living through, not just knowledge about. Literature is concrete, it's universal, it's interpretive, it not only presents the human experience, but it interprets it, and it's artistic. Beauty of form is an essential ingredient. So those are just some of the main takeaways and things that I've learned and took notes on from the book Recovering the Lost Art of Reading, A Quest for the True, the Good, and the Beautiful.